Hey, everybody, welcome back. We are now so excited to jump back into part 2 of a 2-part series where we talk with some of our colleagues and former executives in the public safety and public sector realm. We've already discussed so many amazing things, and we are so excited to have you back for part 2, which is going to be amazing.
Yeah, I'm excited to continue this conversation. Everyone has shared some really great insight and great stories from their career. So let's keep it going. So when you guys are in your roles as, high level leaders, and you're wanting to make decisions, how did you include data in that? And was your organization good at tracking data, or did that not really exist because maybe you didn't have good tools to help you with data? Uh, Pam, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. So that's kind of a complicated question. So I think that in some of our departments we had great data. In the police department they had great policing data. In the water department they had great data about water quality and certain things. But then in other departments we had a lack of data, and really struggled with um, making data-driven decisions. And so technology was helpful for us. Getting some of the NEOGOV products was great, to help us with talent acquisition and figuring out how long it was taking us to fill positions, because we were manual for so long and we had paper applications. And so there's no way to keep up with your turnover rates and things like that. So implementing technology in those places where we didn't have good data was really helpful for us. Um, but data can be a struggle if you don't have the right tools to really capture the right data, to be able to utilize it in the ways that help you make sound decisions. So it was kind of a little bit of hit or miss. I have to be honest about it, and we did struggle in some areas. We were good in some, but we weren't great in others. And so some of the decisions weren't very data driven. They were more impulsive at times, or kind of what we thought was the best direction to go in, and sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes we got lucky and it just happened that we were like, "Oh, yeah, that worked out." But other times we didn't have the data to support a decision we made, and we kinda suffered for it, to be quite honest.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be tough when you don't have the right tools to kind of progress and modernize.
Mhm.
Bob, do you have any examples of using data
Um,
to make decisions?
yeah, I think good, strong leaders know that they're going to make decisions um, with incomplete information, right? Because we're never going to get everything in, like the old saying, like garbage in, garbage out. But I think it's making the best decision with what information you have,
What you
and I
have.
think to get that data is you have to listen to the people that are closest to it. And really, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about, depending on your team and listening to them and putting ego aside and things like that. And so if you're listening to the people closest to the problem, they might have the answer. And then leaning on that. And then the other thing is indecisiveness can be a room killer, or if you're waiting for the perfect data, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, because you can just open it up with the information we have. This is what we're going to do: A, B, C, D. Because you're already saying, look, we don't have anything. Something might change as we get more data, and then we'll go from there. But I think the way you word things, but you have to make it, even a bad decision is a good decision in a sense, because you're doing something. You do have to, think through what are our possibilities, what are the consequences, things like that. And you have to kind of separate the facts from the assumption, because that can also, a small thing can become a big thing. But I think any good leader is going to know that he or she is not going to have perfect data, all the data, and they just have to go from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Evan, I know you shared an example of data tied to burnout and employee behavior, but do you have any other examples with making decisions?
Sure. So this, I guess, would be the flip side, the absence of data, right? So we're good about data, but it doesn't always stand on its face, and that's why I said initially that you got to dig further. It's just your segue into a possible issue, right? And I like what Bob said. You can't just stand there. Vapor lock is not good for the career, and it's not good for your leadership within the organization as a whole. So make a decision, and if it's a bad one, own it, and then go backwards and fix it if you have to. Or anything I would say is better than just indecision in general, because that can cause a bleed with whatever the issue is. So with the absence of data, that's where the experience comes in. And I've seen it time and again, and it's getting more difficult to recruit people, especially in a law enforcement capacity. But we have to have somebody in certain roles so they get promoted too quick. They don't have the adequate training oftentimes, or their peers haven't given them the tools to be successful in role. And that's where it becomes very important for those at the top to be even more supportive and become more of a resource to help those leaders become successful in their role. Because again, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We're training our succession folks to take over for us and to leave it a better place to work, not to set them up for failure and leave the organization worse off than when we started.
Yeah, inaction can be huge. Doug?
Yeah, so I love what you just said there, Evan. I data in and of itself should not be necessarily a singular decision maker in most cases. We use it as a discovery tool to figure out where our issues are, where our challenges are, like in a community, where most of our crashes are, and then we try and do what we can do to mitigate those risks or something. More enforcement, better street lights, whatever it happens to be. So we have all these data points which are really helpful, but sometimes they don't tell the full story, and so we have to dig deeper. It's like an investigation of going, there's something else behind this. What other things could affect that aren't reflected by the data? So there's a lot of opportunities there. I appreciate those concepts because I think it rings really well with having so many systems that have data in them. And in public safety and in any public sector now, there are so many different systems we use to make things work. There's, we have HR software, we have body cameras in policing, we have digital evidence, we have all these different systems, and sometimes those systems don't talk. In most cases, they actually don't talk. So it falls on us as leaders to somehow bring all those data points together to really paint a picture, so to speak. And that can be really challenging. And when you have these siloed systems, sometimes you can find that there are some blind spots. There are things that we just don't see coming because we're missing a data point or missing something experiential or anecdotal that's relevant to the conversation. So again, a lot of experience in this room. So when have you seen those siloed systems really create sometimes problems within your organizations? And how have you managed to navigate that to really find a fix to whatever problem you were trying to solve? And Pam, from a city management perspective, I'd love to hear you talk about this one in particular.
So it is very interesting when you manage a city or work in city administration, every department is in itself a small organization, right? The police department is its organization, the finance department is its organization, fire department is its organization, and they often have their own cultures. And so you're trying to unify that around under one umbrella. And I felt that what we did well was have um, our core administrative services. We had standardization and had great practices and policies in those that allowed people to kind of still have some of their organizational cultures in their different departments, which was really important. But the way you did purchasing, or the way you interacted with finance, or the way you started a new project that involved IT and multiple departments, we had a structure for those things. And so those kept those silos from being so disruptive to the overall running of the organization. And so we had a project management team, for example. And so whenever there were projects that different departments were doing, we would meet together, because it never failed that we had a team of people who worked on the project management team. And it never failed that it was going to require resources over several different departments to get something done. And so we were able to sit together and say, okay, fire department, what are your projects? Police department, what are your projects? And then if those required resources from IT or HR or public relations, we would sit down, we would prioritize and strategize how to handle those big projects. So having some consistency in administrative functions and administrative support allowed us to let those silos be silos, because you're going to have different organizational culture structures in those different departments, and that's something that you can't avoid. You just got to really lean into it and have structures around it to make sure everybody continues to be successful with letting those silos exist, because they're inevitable. And when you waste the energy of trying to break down the silos, it's a waste of time. So how do you figure out how to have some continuity through certain things, some foundational things? Then that's the way, you can still work within those silos, to still be a successful organization.
I have two examples. I have from very different perspectives. It's both in systems and practice versus hardware and software. So back in the early 2000s when I started my career, I was in this, you got to imagine, in Arizona, there's no towns next to each other. So in a county, the next city over is going to be 20, 30 miles away. Back then, it was a weird concept for me, especially in this day and age, that agency A wouldn't talk to agency B because agency B doesn't do it in the way that I do it. So therefore, I don't want to talk to them. There's no sharing of information. They're a dirty word. And talk about not being able to talk about the same people that we're servicing in the same geographic area on purpose. It's a hard concept to grasp in today's day and age. But this same group within county, we now have a consortium where we meet where my former agency and those agencies meet on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, and data share and share information, share concepts, share policies. And so therefore, in just a short amount of time, and I'm talking about the span of maybe 20 years, we went from extraordinarily siloed organizations to being a unity, an organization that effectively works to solve crime and make the entire county a better place to live. So that I know that we weren't alone, but it's kind of shocking that happened in just such a short amount of time. And I think that has a lot to do with where we are in today's day and age with global data sharing. And so in a micro level, say back in my former organization, as we're hiring new people, and if you look at generational studies, we've have Gen Zers coming in now. They actually thrive on change. They're looking for change, and they want the most cutting edge technology, or they're going to go to the organization that does rather than yours. So one of those, it can be unified ecosystems within that organization, whether it's from department to department or if it's platform to platform when it comes to data and data sharing. So from a retention and a recruitment aspect, it behooves the organization to have like systems and shared information, because it can be frustrating for a generation of employees that look for cutting edge ways to solve crime.
Yeah, I mean, to expand on that a little bit, whether it's hardware, software, or people. So we were having an issue with stolen cars. Our towns, unlike Arizona, are very close to one another, and we found that like our detective bureau thought it was just their problem. Our patrol thought it was their problem. Community policing was like, that's not our problem, but in reality, it was everyone's problem. And we really afterwards, we had a meeting with everyone and saying, look, we really siloed. DB was doing a great job, but they weren't sharing with the patrol. Patrol was going out and trying to do, everything and stop the car thieves. And, but they weren't sharing little details that might have helped the detectives. And it became kind of, the data wasn't clean. So, and then on top of that, the surrounding communities were also getting hit, different towns. We weren't, like Evan had said, we weren't sharing information, but we had the same problem. So then we started doing monthly meetings, and my city was bordered by 3 different counties, departments. And so that was another whole issue, because let's say Union County was getting information, Morris County was getting different information, Essex County was getting different information, but we were all touching one another. So we started having monthly meetings and bringing the detective bureau commanders and saying, like, what do you guys have? What do we have? When are you seeing most of your stolen cars? Is it a Friday night, a Sunday morning, what have you? So once we started working and kind of got rid of those silos, it really started helping catching the people that we needed to catch. And then that word got out, like, hey, don't go to these certain towns because they're all working together as a team. Go somewhere else. So I think the communication, again, like anything, communication is key. And silos can be good at sometimes, but for the most part, it can create bad data, and a lot of frustration among people.
Yeah, there's so many good points there, and as we've talked through this today, it's fascinating because everybody has a different perspective. I mean, geographically, you and Evan just talked about it. Different problems is in Arizona versus New Jersey, and Pam and Nicole from an HR perspective and the city management perspective. It's just the problems exist and the challenges exist in local government, but how they're perceived and how they're acted upon are just can be vastly different depending on where you are, how the organization is doing, the culture of the organization, those types of things. So I'm curious with each of you, and thank you again for coming on today. We're so excited to have you here. Is if you could look back on our conversation today, tell me about something that somebody has said that really just kind of resonated with you. You're like, okay, maybe an aha moment or a takeaway that you're thinking, this is a great thing to really think about, and how can I apply that? So what one moment have you had today, some realization maybe, or some fun fact, or maybe an amazing quote that was made, I don't know, um, that really you're going to take away and walk away from this and really think about that some. So Evan, why don't you start us off on that?
Wow, that was on the spot.
Yeah, I know. That's what we do here. We put people on the spot, and that's how it goes.
I don't know that it's one moment, but other the moment you just presented to me, because what I realize is that we're not alone. We have like problems across the spectrum, and it's across industries. Leadership is a concept, and it doesn't need to be, as we already talked about, siloed into specificity into one organization or one field of study. It is a human trait, and it's something that is very unnatural for some people, and it takes a lot of experience. And then you have your natural leaders. And so being able to capitalize on those traits is the key to a functioning, high performing organization and a high performing team. So it's actually refreshing to hear. We talked about East Coast, West Coast, police departments, human resources, city management, and just leadership in general. And we've all got the same struggles. We got all the same concepts. And for us as a whole, I think we understand each of those concepts. And I think that we've done a pretty good job at succeeding at it, because that's why we're here and that's why we're in this forum, to be able to talk about it. So I think that to put a cap on it, leadership is across the spectrum in any organization, and a good functioning leadership in an organization leads to a high performing team.
Great. Pam?
Yeah, like Evan said, there's so many things, there's so many nuggets. I think leaders continually grow. And so you may have been one type of leader in one organization or with one team, and you got to be a different leader with a different organization and a different team. So you have to be very adaptable, and you have to, rise to the occasion. And Doug, you said one of my favorite quotes is Um, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that that's important for leaders to remember that you have the responsibility of the people that you lead, and you're there to make them better. And like we've all said on this call, it's not about us. It's about building and developing our people to take our place one day, or to as Nicole did, to leave and go to to do something for themselves, because it's not about us, it's about them, and it's about how we bring out the best in people. And I think those are the best leaders.
Yeah, and just to build off of that, I really loved when Pam said, you have to know your people. And I think it all comes down to relationships in any aspect of life, work or your family or um, neighbors, whatever. It comes down to communication, trust, being open to being wrong, being vulnerable. I love the quote as well. Do you have any others? I'd love to hear another one, Doug.
Well, we've got so many podcasts coming with so many quotes. It's going
Okay.
to be
All right.
amazing.
I'm gonna watch and I'm
Yeah.
hoping everybody
Oh.
else watches. We
Yep.
can maybe make a top 10 list of quotes from Doug.
Oh,
But to just finish up, so much great information here, and a big part of being a good leader is listening. I coached lacrosse and football years ago, and I used to always tell them and my new police officers, you have 2 ears, 1 mouth. Do is twice as much listening as speaking. Because that will really, I think, take you a long way. Because sometimes people are so worried about what they're going to say, they're not listening. And a lot of answers are given if you truly listen to somebody. So great information. I'm so happy to be part of this and to work with all of you. And I look forward to the next one.
me too. Nicole, you're not escaping this. So what's your takeaway
No,
today?
I love a good takeaway, so I'm
Yeah, this is
excited to
awesome.
share.
Let's do this.
So I have a quote, Bob. I have another quote to add to the
Let's
list, and
go.
I think it's a book title. But my takeaway from the conversation today is, your ego is not your amigo.
Love that.
So
Okay.
remember
Love that.
keep that in mind,
Yeah.
right? And we all kind of touched on that on various ways that it's not about us, and your ego can really get in the way if you let it. And so just be mindful that it is not a helpful trait to have.
Yeah. And
Wow,
I'm
you
personally
just set the bar. You just set the bar high for Doug for his next quote.
well, I don't
Yeah.
have another quote for today, but I do have a takeaway that I think is great, because I first it's nice to see the level of vulnerability amongst fellow colleagues and leaders that you respect. And Nicole, you sharing especially the fact that, it's time for you to leave. That realization sometimes can be, it feels a little bit unnerving, and it feels very, very vulnerable. I think we've all made decisions in our lives as to, where we go and what we're about and what our legacy we want to have as leaders when we leave a place and what that looks like. So, I just appreciate the vulnerability and the sharing that's come all around. And this has been an amazing discussion. So thanks for everybody for being here.
Yeah, I'll second that. Thank you everyone for sharing and spending some time with us today. And thanks for joining another episode of Public Voices. For our listeners, if this sparked conversation for you, please share with your colleagues or your friends. And if there's any topics that you would like us to cover, or perspectives that you want to hear about, please let us know.
Yeah, you can always DM Nicole or me on LinkedIn. We're certainly open to that. If you have an idea or a topic or something that you want to talk about, or maybe your own takeaway, or maybe your own favorite quote that we could use on one of our future episodes, we would love to hear from you and start that conversation up. And finally, a huge shout out to all of our friends and our sponsor at NEOGOV, which helps government HR and public safety agencies work smarter with AI, automation, and configuration. And this week, we're actually filming from NEOGOV here in Utah, beautiful, lovely Utah. So you can learn more at neogov.com. We will see you next week. We appreciate you, and take care of one another.